tests where I persist things and load them back up. Yeah, I don't tend to write integration tests very often.
Right. So you're only testing interfaces mostly?
I'm testing the controller and how it interacts with the interfaces, yeah.
Yeah. And so that means that your interface to non-abstract class, you have a lot of interfaces?
Yeah.
In general?
Yeah, all my services they'll have interfaces.
Yeah.
And then I'll have an implementation. There's normally only one implementation. Sometimes you have variations. One customer wants it done this way, and one wants it done this way. You can set it up in your preferences so it injects whichever one it wants, and then it should just work.
Yeah. I'm going to make a jump because I've got a theory here. My theory is that is a slightly different mindset in the sense that sometimes you can design an API and then you test against that API, which is more or less more of the integration testing, I would say, as opposed to what the mock tests look more like interactions between the interfaces, which...
well, one interface and one concrete class.
But the controller and the service were both interfaces?
No. The controller is a real class.
Wouldn't that be like a generalized exception? You wouldn't know what's through the problem? To just worry about the API?
Sorry, say again?
Wouldn't that be like a generalized exception handler that you wouldn't know where the issue arose? He's got a more granular view of the exception if there's an issue.
Yeah, so the controller is a concrete class.
Right.
That's its code down the bottom there. And it was delegating to the item service.
Right.
And the item service was the thing that was mocked. So I'm saying the controller should make a call to this service with these arguments, and given the case where it returns null or it returns this, I have a different case for all of those, and I test how my controller handles all of those different outcomes.
So that actually this mock-up test is most likely testing how you implement the things right.
Yeah.
It means that before you really implement something, you think, I should implement this way using another services or another object by so many times in set order, and then you write the test in this way, and then first of all you run the test, you find this failed definitely because you did not implement anything, and then you write the implementation, make the test correct. And then you make sure you really implement that in the way which you expected. The question is that if later on, if you switch to another implementation, it means all of your tests need to be rewritten.
So if I were to change my item controller to not use item service but to use service X, then that'd be, but that would just be a different controller. Yeah, that's two different types of functionality.
No, he's talking about refactoring.
Yeah, but all my tests are for item controller. So if I want to change the way item controller works, I change the test first and say, I now expect it to interact with these services and to return these things. It's a new set of test cases, basically. So if you decide that it no longer should be talking to your item service, it should actually be going to someone else's service to do something else, you would just change your test to say, hey, have a look at these methods, this is what it should be doing, and then change your code and it should all just pass again.
Yeah. I guess, I just feel that a lot of times when you're writing stuff and you're refactoring, you don't know what you're going to end up with.
Right, your tests are not the final. Your tests are to revolutions.
And so where I tend to go is to write what I think is what I will do, because that's a learning process of refactoring it. And what you're saying is that you actually write your test first.
You write your code first and he writes his test first.
You're talking about TDD versus...
So what you're saying is that neither of you design your application properly.
Yes, that's true.
So what we're saying is they're real developers. They're real world developers.
You can still use Mockito.
What's defined properly, Richard?
Hey?
Defined properly, Richard.
No, I'm kidding.
What I would say...
It's a very developer-centric view of the world, though. Extremely developer-centric view of the world. And that works in some cases, particularly where you don't actually have a clue what the application's about. Which I would say is probably 80 to 90% of the applications that are built out there.
Which few?
The developer-centric world where you don't know what you and your customers don't know what you're really doing.
Oh, right. You need to go through lots of iterations.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is
whereas if you have a very specific set of requirements, then there are alternative mechanisms.
But the requirements will change anyway.
And they do.
So you may as well not.
And model-driven development is just as effective, and certainly much more predictable than TDD. There are a lot of people out there that argue that TDD is mental, absolutely mental.
What TDD
TDD is not
specs versus how you develop your particular class.
they're addressing totally different
Most
things.
people do test-driven development. It's actually test-driven design for most people.
Right.
And that's what you've just told me. You said you use test-driven
the
design.
specification.
You design your
APIs
APIs using tests. That's what you
That's
described.
That's how my controller interacts with things. That's at a very low level.
I'm not saying I agree or disagree with either of those things. I certainly don't do TDD, but I don't do upfront design always. I don't do either of those always. But I do far more integration tests than I do unit tests.
But you can do one and not the other both ways. I mean, you can have very strict upfront design and do your coding first and do your testing afterwards, or you could have an evolutionary type
If you do all your
approach.
coding first and then do your tests, you find you can't write tests.
And the thing
No,
too is,
Well, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying.
Write tests is because you're using JUnit and TestNG, which are crap in comparison to EasyB, which you should be using behavior-driven development, not this rubbish.
but if you do the test-driven, what you've done is you've created an asset that lives as long as your code does. Because every time you do a change to that code, your tests are automatically going to tell you that you've mucked something else somewhere else in the
But-
application.
But what does the word test mean? Test is meaningless.
But you can use Mockito when you're using EasyB.
Yeah, I'm not arguing about Mockito.
No.
That's what we're talking about, wasn't it?
No.
You've moved on.
Robin has clearly pulled this into a.
Sorry.
Okay, so is this actually a sensible idea in the first place?
Well, no, I'm just trying to find out
Which I just love, by the way.
why I struggle with some of these ideas, because I find that
You're old.
yeah, I'm old and scratchy,
So scary.
and I end up doing a lot more full integration testing, and I don't do so much unit testing. And that's my mentality, is that when I go to do something and it changes, I actually go to the code and design and code. Whereas I'm guessing that what I'm suggesting is that you more design your tests up front and then you change your code to suit your test.
Yeah. I think about the outcomes and the interactions before I think about how I'm actually going to make those
So you
tests.
don't think about your behaviour.
Right, and
I know. So why don't you use a behaviour-driven
Oh,
development?
because I haven't had a chance to. I'd be really keen to use EasyB, but I haven't had a chance.
So I'm curious, what type of applications or, real world
Oh,
problems are you solving
See,
with
to me, this
what you
is
do in your
much
job
more fun discussion.
using this?
Okay, we're developing it's a web application for providing feedback for machines in a factory. So the operator will say, I'm starting a job, I'm stopping a job, I'm adding downtimes, I'm adding waste, it's all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that
makes a lot more sense for your design and your philosophy you're approaching to me.
versus
I don't know, if you were doing just network communications or things that weren't touching the web. I don't know, I'm trying to think of my own project.
Let it
out, Kiri, let it out. Yeah, in my own project, we use Mina, and that's where we do most of our mocking stuff in Apache Mina for our network communication layer.
All right, you're talking about HTTP mocking type thing.
No, we've got a custom protocol that I have to, that's legacy, and I have to use it. It's implemented in Mina, and so that's where we do our mocking, and it's worked pretty well. But for the other services,
That's outside of Java, right?
no, it's a Java implementation of a custom protocol that talks.
Yeah, but the thing you're mocking,
Oh, the object is,
that's a Java object.
it's a Java object,
Okay.
so it's inherited from Apache Mina though, and it supports easy mock inside. I don't know much about it, just do some calling, gives me a mocking object. and I work with it, but
Kiri, what were you going to say? Putting your hand up. Just talk.
Too polite.
Don't be. Just talk.
So I'm interested that you haven't really mentioned JMOC. Particularly JMOC. So JMOC 1.
JMOC 1
sucked a
didn't
bit,
support refactoring,
but
right?
Yeah, JMOC 2 is much better.
Yeah.
Like does all the stuff that Evie
So they moved away from
Mockito
putting
does.
everything in a string.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
This-
moved on.
They've learned from the other
Because
people.
I look